What is going on here, Kurt? Why do we have two guns for today's video? So this one is a Zenith ZF5, which is a new production gun that showed up just a couple days ago for evaluation. That's what we're going to be spending the majority of our time here today doing. But we're in a somewhat uncommon situation in that this is a Zenith ZF5P, which is a gun that arrived years ago for evaluation. I subsequently kept it because I was like, you know what, I need an MP5 style gun laying around anyway for various purposes. So it's not very often that in a single video we get to see what a product line was and what it is now. For instance, these guns were originally manufactured in Turkey by MKE and then imported to Afton, Virginia. This one is manufactured in Afton, Virginia. So we get to do the Turkish manufacturer and the American manufacturer and what's the difference. So we got a lot of ground to cover in today's video, so let's get to it. Zenith USA is well known for firearms design after the much coveted HK MP5. This weapon employs a roller delayed blowback operating system that softens recoil and lends itself much more readily to suppression over its direct blowback competitors. The ZF5 is the 8.9-inch variant and comes in a 6-groove 1-in-10 right-hand twist 4150 cold hammer forged barrel. That barrel terminates with two attachments, both a Trilog adapter and a .28 muzzle thread. The pile of accessories that comes with it includes a Trilog flash hider, a 1913 claw mount, a fast adjust 2-point sling, 3 magazines, and a pretty decent cleaning kit. All that wraps up into a really nice wheeled case with tearaway foam for organization. Let's go ahead and do that comparison that we talked about between the MKE days and the America that we have going on now. I'm going to skip a couple details that predominantly deal with the full auto and things like that. I just don't think that that's like a mainstream thing that most consumers are going to be looking for. But if you are interested in that, then Mr. Guns and Gear's review of this particular firearm is exactly the video that you want. Now, first and foremost, cosmetics. And first in the cosmetics category, I would say that the polymer has gotten an upgrade on the new firearm versus the one from MKE. And what I mean by that is, you know that it's true, but you don't really know how to describe it. It's like the difference between picking up like a Magpul PMag and like a magazine that's made in Asia, right? You can tell that there's a clear difference there. You just don't know exactly what it is. That's what I'm talking about on this one. So the Turkish polymer is not quite at the same level. America. Keep it on with the cosmetics. Finish. The finish, I would call the MKE gun painted, and I would call the American gun finished. They very well may be done the exact same way, and this one is just aged more than this one. However, you can tell that this gun was hang and sprayed, versus this one, they at least disassembled it and painted it before they did that. And you can see that most prolifically right here at the front sight leaf was definitely in that tower when this thing was painted, versus when this one was done, it was clearly not. Let's move on to the welds. And I'm going to put this in the cosmetic category because as someone who welds, I'm going to say that all the welds on both these guns are more than sufficient to hold everything together. But the welds on the American gun are much, much nicer than that of the MKE gun. In particular, there are two places I'll draw your attention. Right here on the MKE gun, there was this weld made for the purposes of importation. Obviously, there is no comparable weld on this firearm because it wasn't imported, so they didn't have to do that. But if we want a comparable weld, then we can look at the rear sight tower. And between these two welds, I think you can guess which one is made in America. On to the selector, and we'll start with the MKE gun because this has got what I'm going to call the standard selector on it. And you can see that my thumb is big enough basically to get there and get it done. But if we look at what's been done on the new production gun, we have the Magpul Selector. Originally, the MP5 style guns are going to have a single-sided right-handed selector. And you can see over on this side, nothing, right? If we look at this one, we have an ambidextrous selector, and it looks to me, I haven't taken this apart, but it looks like this is reversible depending on which side you want to operate the gun from. Much easier to use this selector than the original. Now, both of these are going to be your true semi-auto lowers with the semi-auto shelf instead of the pinned and clipped variants. But the one thing that I would point out is that the MKE variant had these weird finger grooves on here that never fit my hand, and I would guess nobody's hand really. Whereas the new production gun has what I'm going to call it your standard HK style, just slick grip. Are you guys aware that we have an affiliates page that lists a whole bunch of discount codes on hot deals? Like for instance, my choice in EDC lights. PowerTac. This is their Warrior. It's basically a pocket G-class star. So if you're looking to get over things on the holidays, and check it out, link in the description box down below. Now the Trilog adapters. I'm not much for Trilog adapters, mostly because most of my cans, I've skipped that whole stage of my life. I consider it outdated technology, but some people really like it and are purists. So the Trilog adapters on the new firearm are much better than the old ones. In fact, I would call these ones never actually intended to be used just because they're so coarsely done. Now, that said, I've never had a Trilog adapter on this thing. That's the way they came originally, and they just look dull. Now, the thing with dull Trilog adapters is they can cause excessive rattle, and that doesn't really matter if you're talking about a flash hider. It matters when you're talking about a can. So, sharp Trilog adapters, which are a substantial improvement over the MKE model. Onto the rear sight towers, and I know this is going to shock you, but we have yet another shortcut. The Turkish manufactured gun just has the slots cut out of it, whereas the new manufactured firearm has a true multi-aperture rear sight tower. So you basically spin this, if I can do this without screwing up my frame, yep, and you can see that we get multiple size holes for different applications. And then the last point of comparison, which is admittedly a small detail, but I think it kind of speaks to the manufacturing mindset. If you look at the non-reciprocating charging handle here on the new manufactured gun, it is a much nicer, much crisper, better molded, and just all-around sharper charging handle. I don't know about you, but it gets cold and snowy and wet here, and stuff like that are things that are important to me because that's the stuff that really is that small little bit between fumbling the gun into the snow and actually retaining it when it's nasty out. Ammunition compatibility. We're going to lead off with a standard 115 grain ball round. And now we have a subsonic loading, also from Fiocchi. This is a 158 grain. What is pertinent here is not the group size, although you can make your jokes all you want. I was not shooting for precision. What we're looking for is the shape of the holes. And as you can see, 115 grain looks stable, and 158 grain also looks stable. So gun's totally capable of stabilizing those heavy loads that you're shooting for subsonic. Our next concern is going to be a three-part segment on suppressibility. Now there's a couple different considerations here for suppressibility. So the first thing I want to see is after we add a can to the end of this thing, how does it react with those subsonic rounds in reference to the barrel length? We have a relatively, what I would say a relatively long barrel for an MP5 style gun here. Is it going to push those subsonic rounds over the sound barrier? I have added the AB Suppressor's F4L. There's a full video out on this suppressor if it's something that you're interested in. Leading off with supersonic rounds so you can see what it is that we're talking about. Off the plate. Subsonic rounds. I'm going with negative, so that is a check mark. Barrel's not too long. The next question being, how good of a job do they do on threading the barrel? Yeah, I'm gonna go with pretty freaking good. Point of aim, point of impact, point of aim, point of impact, unsuppressed, suppressed. I'm not gonna claim that this is representative of the unsuppressed accuracy. I wasn't trying all that hard, so that's probably somewhat me. But I also wasn't trying really hard on this one either. So oftentimes when you add a can to a gun, we do see it improve in accuracy. And I think the major takeaway here is that we don't see any point of impact shift between the two groups. We're going to call the center of this group roughly there. We're going to call the center of that group, well, where the 5th round hit. All right, everybody, we have a beautiful night out tonight. You can see that we have a full moon up there. And today we're going to be testing how the ZF5 does at night. Specifically, we're going to be looking at the ejection port and see if we can see anything coming out of it from the shooter's perspective. Our can that we got on the end here is the AB F4L. This is what I'm going to call a medium pressure can, and we're going to be shooting full powered 115 grain right into the berm here. All right, now we're going to really dial it in there. So this is with the focus ring. Okay. And now we've moved up to the VERS 9S, which is what I'm going to call maximum suppression here. So here we go. The genesis of this design predates the widespread integration of 1913 Picatinny rail as an optics mounting solution. So in order to integrate optics into this gun, we're using a claw mount. Now, a claw mount is just what it sounds like. It's a set of claws that basically sucks this mount down on top of some index points, and it rides on these rails right here. There's a couple index points for it to go on. There's a couple good ones out there, and I'm not saying that this one isn't good, but the best one out there, in my opinion, is the Midwest Industries variant. But this one came with it, so we're going to use it in today's video. It's going to integrate the exact same way. These things can be notoriously tricky to kind of get on, so I'm going to give you guys a really quick life hack. First and foremost, lock your bolt to the rear, and then remove the right rear claw and screw. Then run the other 3 screws all the way out. Basically rock the thing all the way over so that that claw goes into the open ejection port. Then it allows you to slide the whole thing down on top of it, and then you only have to float one of those claws in there and run the screw down, and then tighten the whole thing down and you're ready to rock. So I've done this a couple times. This one is interesting in that it has some lightning cuts in it, and you can still see the iron sights all the way through because they have reliefed this for a sight so that you can see clear through it. Doing a pretty good job on the claw mount as far as claw mounts go. I think it's safe to say that Zenith has improved quite a bit since moving manufacturing to the United States. The thing is that they weren't really bad guns to begin with, so such a substantial improvement is impressive in my book. Now, if there is one critique I have for continuous improvement, the only malfunctions I had while testing were with the subsonic loads that I have standardized on. It was always the same malfunction, and it was always a feeding issue. I'm going to attribute this to the somewhat angular geometry of that 158 grain projectile in that loading. So this isn't a huge deal, but it is a point they could at least explore to see if there's a remedy for future iterations. Anyway, I had a whole lot of leftover shooting footage that I didn't use because, well, YouTube hates me. So here are a few cuts. Thanks for watching.